because they grow well together and help each other. The corn provides a stalk for the beans to climb. The beans put goodness back into the soil, and the squash leaves shade the ground, keeping weeds down and moisture in. It's clever farming, learned over centuries. You work together with your family and neighbours to plant, tend and harvest the crops. The work is hard under the sun, but there's a deep satisfaction in seeing the plants grow and knowing they will feed your people through the long winter. Evenings are for community. After the day's work is done, you gather with your family and neighbours. Maybe you share a meal cooked over an open fire. The food is simple but nourishing. Dried meat or fish, roasted vegetables, perhaps some berries or nuts. As the firelight flickers, stories are told. These aren't just stories for entertainment, they are the history of your people, the lessons passed down from your ancestors, the explanations for how the world came to be. You learn about the spirits of the earth and sky, the importance of honouring your elders, the right way to live. There might be drumming, singing and dancing. These gatherings strengthen the bonds between everyone. You feel safe, loved and connected. Everyone has a place. Everyone belongs. Your society has its own rules and ways of doing things. There are leaders, maybe a chief or a council of elders, or perhaps decisions are made by talking things through until everyone agrees. Arguments happen, of course, that's just human nature. But you have ways of solving problems that are about finding balance and making things right, not always about punishment. Respect is incredibly important. Respect for elders, respect for the earth, respect for each other. You understand that everything you do affects not just yourself, but your family, your community, and the generations to come. It's a world where relationships, both with people and with nature, are everything. There were so many different tribes spread across this huge land. Each had its own language, its own unique customs, its own way of building homes and making clothes. The people in the forests of the East lived differently from the people on the Great Plains, who lived differently from the people in the deserts of the Southwest, or the people along the rivers of the Northwest coast. Some people lived in one place all year, farming and building permanent villages. Others moved with the seasons, following the animals they hunted, or finding the best places to gather food at different times of the year. It was a diverse world, full of different ways of life, but most shared that deep connection to the land and a strong sense of community. Think about the skills you possessed in this life. You could make tools from stone, bone, and wood. You knew how to build shelter that protected you from the weather. You could make clothing from animal hides or woven plant fibers. You understood the weather patterns, could read the signs in nature. You had a wealth of knowledge that was passed down through spoken words and shared experiences not written in books. It was a challenging life in some ways. Weather could be harsh, food wasn't always easy to find, conflicts sometimes arose between different groups. But it was also a life where you felt truly connected to the world around you, where your purpose was clear, to care for your family and community, and to live in balance with the earth. Historians still ponder exactly how many people lived in North America before Europeans arrived. Estimates vary widely, partly because it's hard to count people who didn't build big stone cities everywhere or keep detailed written records that survived. Some estimates are in the low millions, while others go much higher, maybe even 10 million or more. It's a point of contention among experts if the land was truly wild, or if native peoples had already changed the environment quite a bit through things like controlled burning to clear land for farming or hunting. What is clear is that it wasn't an empty land waiting to be discovered. It was a populated place with complex societies and deep histories. And a little quirky tidbit. Some Native American groups developed incredibly complex systems for managing their resources and environment. For example, in the Pacific Northwest, people didn't just fish for salmon, they managed the entire river system, sometimes building weirs, like fences in the water, to guide fish, and even cultivating certain plant foods in sophisticated ways that looked a bit like gardening, ensuring there would be food for generations to come. It wasn't just taking what was there, it was actively working with nature to make sure it stayed healthy and productive. Imagine having that deep knowledge, that understanding that you weren't just living on the land but living with it, like a partner. This life you're imagining, this world, feels stable. It feels ancient and strong. Your people have been here for longer than anyone can easily remember. The stories go back into the mists of time, the mountains, the rivers, the forests. They hold the history of your ancestors. You walk in their footsteps, using the paths they made, living in the places they lived. It's a continuous line stretching back, back, back. You are part of something vast and enduring. The biggest challenges you face are the natural ones. A hard winter, a dry summer, maybe a sickness that passes through. But your people have faced these things before and survived. You have the knowledge, the community, the spiritual connection to handle what comes. You feel prepared for life, for the challenges of living on this land. You don't know it yet, but something is coming across the water that will change everything you know, everything you are, in ways you could never possibly imagine. Something that won't respect the balance, the history, or the deep connection your people have with this land. You are living your life, following the seasons, perhaps preparing for the winter ahead, or maybe celebrating a successful harvest. The days follow the familiar rhythm, but then, one day, something strange appears on the horizon. It's far out on the water, just a tiny speck at first. You might be near the coast, or perhaps word travels to your inland village from people living closer to the sea. The speck gets bigger and bigger. It doesn't look like any canoe or boat you've ever seen. It's as enormous, with tall shapes rising from it, like trees growing right out of the water, holding up huge white cloths that catch the wind. These are sailing ships, unlike anything in your experience. Your people have stories about strange things sometimes appearing, maybe spirits, or beings from other worlds. But this feels different. As the ships get closer, you can see they are definitely physical things, made of wood, sailing on the water, and there are people on them. People who look, well, different. Very different. Their skin might be pale, their hair colours strange, their clothing made of materials you've never seen before. They come ashore in smaller boats, landing on the beaches. They carry objects that sparkle or make loud noises. They smell different. Their language sounds like nothing you've ever heard, a jumble of harsh or soft sounds that make no sense. Imagine the mix of feelings washing over you and your community. There's curiosity, of course. Who are these people? Where do they come from? What do they want? There's wonder at their strange tools and ships, but there's also apprehension, maybe fear. They're so unfamiliar, so unknown. Do they mean harm? Will they respect the ways of your people and the spirits of this land? In some places, the first encounters might be cautious but relatively peaceful. Maybe your people are known for being welcoming, offering food and shelter to strangers, as is your custom. You might try to communicate using hand gestures or sharing simple gifts. The newcomers might seem interested in trading for things like furs, or perhaps food and fresh water for their long journey. You might trade some animal skins or extra food from your stores for some of their shiny objects or sharp tools made of metal, things you've never had before. These metal items seem very useful. An axe head that stays sharp much longer than stone, a pot that doesn't break when you heat it. But even in these early, seemingly calm moments, there's a tension. You can tell the newcomers have a different way of looking at the world. They seem very interested in taking things. They look at the land with a different kind of hunger in their eyes. They don't seem to see the spirits in the trees or the sacredness of the rivers. They see resources, things to be used, perhaps things to be owned. This is a strange concept to you, owning a piece of the earth. How can you own the wind or the river that flows through? As more ships arrive, bringing more people, the visits become less like brief stops and more like settling. They start building structures that are very different from your homes. Solid, square buildings, often in places you use for hunting or gathering. They start marking off areas of land, acting as if they own it. This feels very wrong. This land belongs to everyone, and to the spirits, and to itself. It provides for all. How can one person, or one group, claim a piece of it and say others cannot use it? Communication is a huge problem. Even with gestures, understanding each other's intentions and ideas is incredibly difficult. Your concept of a treaty or agreement might be very different from theirs. You might agree to share access to a certain area, thinking of it as a shared path or hunting ground. They might understand it as you giving them ownership of that land forever, telling you they can do whatever they want with it now. These misunderstandings, sometimes innocent, sometimes perhaps not so innocent, plant the seeds for bigger troubles later on. Historians still debate the exact spots and dates of many of the very first landings and interactions across North America, as records can be unclear or only tell one side of the story. It's a point of contention among experts if initial interactions were primarily hostile or generally more curious and cautious before conflicts became widespread. What is clear is that these arrivals were not isolated events. They were the start of a continuous stream of people coming across the ocean. A quirky, lesser-known tidbit. Sometimes early encounters involved gestures and items that were completely misinterpreted by both sides. For example, some European explorers used beads or small trinkets for trade, which to them were cheap goods. To many native peoples, however, these items made of shell or shiny materials could hold deep cultural or spiritual value, maybe similar to sacred objects or currency used in their own societies. So, a trade that the European thought was a tiny gift for a large amount of resources might have been seen by the native person as a fair exchange for items of comparable different value. This difference in understanding value and purpose shows just how wide the cultural gap was. Imagine trying to explain your world to someone who doesn't understand the concept of living in balance with nature, who sees a forest only as timber to be cut down, a river only as a way to transport goods or power a mill. They ask about gold, about silver, about things that seem shiny and valuable to them, while you might value a perfectly crafted stone tool or a beautiful bird feather. Your wealth is in the health of your community, the richness of the land, the strength of your traditions. Their wealth seems to be in possessions, in things they can take and carry away. As more ships arrive, they bring more people, and these people start to build settlements. They clear forests, they plant their own crops, they build fences. The world around you starts to change, and not in a way that feels natural or right. The animals you hunt might be scared away by the noise and activity. The places where you gather plants might be ploughed under. The rivers might become polluted. This new way of life, the settler's way, seems disruptive, taking without giving back. You try to understand these newcomers. You observe their customs, their strange rituals, their tools. Some of your people might even try to learn their language, a difficult and frustrating task. You see their strengths. Their metal tools are powerful, their ships can travel vast distances. But you also see things that trouble you. They seem quick to anger, sometimes cruel, often disrespectful of the land and its original inhabitants. They seem to believe their way is the only right way, and they want to change you to be like them. This first sight of the ships was just the beginning. It was like the first tiny crack in a dam. You didn't know it yet, but that crack would soon break open, unleashing a flood of changes, challenges and hardships that would completely reshape your world and the world of your people forever. The wonder and curiosity you felt at first are slowly being replaced by worry and a growing sense that something is terribly wrong. And the ships keep coming. The strange ships keep arriving, and the people on them keep coming ashore. You might get used to seeing them, even if you don't fully understand them, but then something new and far more terrifying begins to happen. People in your village start getting sick. Not just a cold or a fever that passes after a few days. This is different. The sickness spreads rapidly, moving from one person to another with frightening speed. It hits the children hardest and the elders, but it strikes everyone down, even the strongest hunters and the most skilled healers. Imagine someone you love, your child, your parent, your sibling, suddenly developing a high fever, coughing violently, perhaps breaking out in terrible sores or blisters. You try your traditional medicines, the herbs and healing practices that have worked for generations, but they do nothing. The sickness doesn't respond to anything you know. It just gets worse. People become too weak to walk, too weak to eat, and then they die. The number of people getting sick and dying is overwhelming. You've dealt with illness before, of course. Every community does. But this is different in its scale and its severity. It sweeps through your village like a fire, leaving grief and emptiness behind. Your traditional ways of caring for the sick and burying the dead are strained to the breaking point. There aren't enough healthy people to tend to everyone who is ill, or to perform the necessary ceremonies for those who have passed on. This sickness is like an invisible enemy. You can't fight it with a bow and arrow. You can't negotiate with it. You don't even know where it comes from or how to stop it. The newcomers seem to get these sicknesses too sometimes, but they often recover. For your people, it is devastating. Why? Because your bodies have never met these diseases before. Sicknesses like smallpox, measles, influenza, whooping cough, diphtheria, typhus and others have been common among Europeans for centuries. Their people developed some level of resistance over time. Your people have no such resistance. It's like your bodies don't know how to fight these new invaders. Imagine the fear. Every cough, every fever, every new spot on the skin brings terror. Is it that sickness? Is it coming for you or your family? The cheerful sound of children playing might be replaced by the quiet of grief and worry. The vibrant energy of the village might be dimmed by sorrow and weakness. The death toll is staggering. In some areas, 50% of the population might die. In others, it could be 70%, 80%, or even 90%. Whole villages can be wiped out or left with only a handful of survivors, too few to carry on their way of life effectively. The knowledge held by the elders, the skills of the hunters, the stories and songs, much of it is lost as the people who held that knowledge die. This loss isn't just about numbers. It's about the fabric of your society being torn apart. Who will teach the children now? Who will lead the hunts? Who will remember the ancient ceremonies? The sudden, massive death creates a trauma that runs deeper than just grief. It's like your very ability to continue as a people is under threat. Historians agree that disease brought by Europeans was the single biggest factor in the rapid decline of Native American populations after contact. Estimates vary widely on the exact death rates in different regions, and it's a point of contention among experts if some outbreaks were worse because they were followed by famine or other disruptions caused by the newcomers. But there is no debate that the impact was catastrophic, far exceeding any deaths caused by violence in the early years. A quirky, lesser-known tidbit about this period is how these diseases sometimes spread before the people carrying them even arrived in a specific area. Trade routes that had existed for centuries between different native tribes become pathways for disease. A sickness caught by one group during an interaction with Europeans on the coast could be unknowingly passed inland through trade or travel, arriving in villages that had never seen a European ship or face. So, your community might be devastated by illness carried by people who look just like you, who are your trading partners, not the strange newcomers themselves, making the source of the suffering even more mysterious and terrifying at first. Imagine trying to make sense of this. Is it punishment from the spirits? Have your people done something wrong? Is it sorcery from the pale-skinned newcomers? They don't seem to suffer as much as you do. Maybe they have powerful magic. These questions would haunt you, adding a spiritual burden to the immense physical and emotional suffering. Your world, which felt stable and understandable before, now feels unpredictable and terrifying. The balance is broken in a fundamental way. Even if your community wasn't directly interacting with the newcomers, the effects of the sickness could reach you. Maybe you relied on trading with a coastal tribe for certain goods, and now they are gone, or too few and too weak to trade. Maybe your traditional enemies, weakened by sickness, are less of a threat, which might seem like a good thing at first, but it disrupts the long-standing relationships and balances of power between tribes. Or maybe neighbouring tribes, desperate after their own losses, start encroaching on your territory, leading to new conflicts. The ripple effects of the disease were vast and complex. The arrival of the ships brought people and goods, but it also brought invisible killers that decimated populations, shattered communities, and created a landscape of grief and loss across the continent. Your world isn't just changing, it's shrinking. And the people who are causing this, even if unintentionally through sickness, are also starting to eye your land, your resources, with increasing desire. The loss of life weakens your ability to resist what is coming next. So the invisible sickness has swept through, leaving your community smaller, weaker, and filled with sorrow. The world feels quieter now, too quiet. The vibrant life that was here before has been diminished. And while you're struggling with this immense loss, the newcomers are still arriving. More ships, more people, and they are spreading out. Remember how you felt that the land was something shared, something you belonged to, not something you could own. Well, the newcomers definitely have a different idea. They arrive, look at the vast forests, the fertile valleys, the clear rivers, and they see opportunity. They see land to be claimed, to be used for their own purposes, and they start taking it. Imagine seeing strangers walk onto land that your people have lived on for generations. This is where you hunt, where you gather your medicines, where your ancestors are buried. But these newcomers don't ask permission. They might put up markers, clear trees, and start building their square houses and fences. They act as if the land is empty, even though you are standing right there watching them. They might try to make agreements with you, often using interpreters whose understanding might be poor or who might not be trustworthy. They might offer goods, tools, blankets, alcohol, in exchange for vast areas of land. From your perspective, you might think you are agreeing to share the use of the land, perhaps allowing them to farm in one area while you continue to hunt and gather elsewhere. You might not have a concept of selling land forever. Land is eternal, like the sky or the water. How can you sell that? But the newcomer's concept of ownership is very different. To them, once they have bought or claimed the land, it is theirs completely. They can kick you off it. They can stop you from hunting there, from gathering plants, from visiting your sacred sites. The lines they draw on pieces of paper, their deeds and treaties, mean that your world, your physical home, starts to shrink. Imagine walking to a favourite hunting spot only to find it cleared of trees and fenced off. Imagine trying to gather the familiar berries only to be told you're trespassing on someone's private property. The places that hold your history, your memories, the graves of your ancestors, are suddenly off limits, or worse, ploughed over or built upon. It's not just losing physical space, it's losing your connection to the land that defines who you are. Treaties were often made, agreements signed, or marked with a symbol by native leaders who couldn't read the European languages. But these treaties were very rarely honoured by the newcomers for long. As more settlers arrived wanting more land, the agreements were often broken. The lines drawn on maps would shift, always in favour of the settlers. Your people might be told you had to move, even after agreeing to stay in a certain area forever. Promises vanished like smoke. Historians have studied hundreds of treaties made between European powers and later the United States and Canada, and Native American tribes. A mainstream historical fact is that a vast majority of these treaties were eventually broken, ignored, or reinterpreted by the European American governments as their need and desire for land grew. It's a point of contention among experts if some early native leaders fully grasped the European concept of permanent land sale, or if they believed they were entering into agreements about shared use or temporary access. Regardless, the outcome was consistent. Native land was lost piece by piece. A quirky, lesser-known tidbit relates to the European concept of improving the land. Europeans often believed that land was only truly owned or valuable if it was being improved through farming or building permanent structures in the European style. If native peoples were using the land for hunting, gathering, or even farming in ways that didn't look like European agriculture, like controlled burns or rotating crops in certain patterns, the newcomers sometimes viewed the land as unused and therefore free for the taking. This idea that their way of using land was superior and justified taking it from others was a powerful and frankly absurd part of their mindset. Imagine someone saying your beautiful productive garden isn't improved because it doesn't look exactly like their neat rows of corn. The pressure to give up land wasn't always through direct sale or broken treaties. Sometimes it was through intimidation, sometimes through violence. As the settlers grew in number and strength, they might simply push onto your land, daring you to stop them, knowing that your numbers are reduced by sickness and your traditional weapons might be less effective against their guns. They might kill the game animals you rely on for food, making it harder for you to survive on your traditional territory and forcing you to move. Imagine the frustration, the helplessness. You try to explain your rights, your history on this land. You point to the graves of your ancestors, the sacred places, the resources you rely on. But often, The newcomers don't listen, or they don't care. They have a different vision for this land, one that doesn't include you living on it in the way you always have. Your home is being taken from you, not just the physical structure you live in, but the entire world around you that provides for you and connects you to your past and future. The loss of land isn't just about territory on a map. It's about losing access to the resources you need to survive. The hunting grounds, the fishing spots, the places to gather plants. It's about losing the connection to the sacred sites that are vital to your spiritual practices. It's about being confined to smaller and smaller areas, often land that is less fertile or desirable, while the best land is taken by others. This loss is deeply painful, cutting at the very roots of your identity and way of life. Your world, already reeling from sickness, is now physically shrinking around you. So, the newcomers are taking the land, and you are feeling squeezed and displaced. But it's not just the physical space that is changing. The very way of life, the rules your society follows, the traditions that guide your days. These are also under attack. The newcomers bring their own set of rules, their own laws, and they expect you to follow them. Imagine living in a community where decisions are made through discussion among elders, where disagreements are resolved by making things right between people, maybe through apologies or offering gifts, rather than punishment. Your laws are based on oral traditions, on long-held customs, on the needs of the community and the balance with nature. Now these strangers arrive with written laws, with concepts like courts, judges, and prisons. They might not understand or respect your leaders. They might try to set up their own forms of government in your territory, ignoring the authority of your chiefs or councils. Your traditional ways of handling crime or disputes seem strange and perhaps weak to them. If someone wrongs you, your traditional way might be to seek restoration and balance within the community. Their way might be to arrest someone, lock them away, or demand payment in money, a concept that might be new and confusing to you. Think about how your community handles marriage, or raising children, or passing down property. These are governed by your customs, traditions that have been followed for generations. The newcomers might see these customs as uncivilized or wrong. They might try to force you to marry in their way, raise your children in their beliefs, or inherit property according to their laws, which might be very different, perhaps favoring individuals over the community or men over women in ways that are foreign to you. They might try to stop you from practicing your spiritual beliefs, your connection to the land, your ceremonies honoring the spirits of nature, your sacred objects and sites. These are central to your life. The newcomers often have a different religion, one where they worship in specific buildings and have different ideas about the relationship between humans and the divine. They might see your ways as pagan or devil worship and try to forbid your ceremonies, destroy your sacred objects, or prevent you from visiting your holy places. This isn't just an attack on your religion, it's an attack on your identity, on the deep spiritual connection you have to the world around you. Your language is another target. Your language holds the history of your people, the nuances of your culture, the way you understand the world. The newcomers might insist that you learn their language, English, Spanish, French, and forbid you from speaking your own, especially in schools they might set up for your children. Imagine being told your own language is somehow bad or primitive, and that you must speak like them. It's like being told your very voice is wrong. Historians call this process cultural assimilation, the attempt to make one group of people absorb the culture of another. A mainstream historical fact is that European colonizers actively tried to suppress Native American languages, religions, and customs, often through policies in schools and legal systems. It's a point of contention among experts whether the primary motivation was genuinely believing they were saving native people from their own ways, or whether it was primarily a tool to weaken native identity and resistance, making it easier to take their land and resources. Likely, it was a complicated mix of both. A quirky, lesser-known tidbit involves early attempts to create written versions of native languages, while often done by missionaries or scholars with their own goals, like translating religious texts. These efforts sometimes use the sounds of native languages to create alphabets based on European letters, or even invented entirely new writing systems. Imagine trying to explain sounds and concepts from your language that don't exist in their writing system. It was a complex and often awkward process, showing how different the very structures of thought and communication could be. Imagine the confusion and frustration of navigating this new world of rules. You try to live peacefully, following your own laws, but you might unknowingly break one of their laws and find yourself in serious trouble. You might go to their court seeking justice for a wrong done to you by a newcomer, only to find that their system doesn't understand your perspective, or perhaps doesn't value your life or property as much as theirs. Your voice, your truth, doesn't seem to carry the same weight in their system. This imposition of new rules and the attack on traditional customs created deep divisions within communities. Some people might try to adapt, seeing it as the only way to survive in this changing world. Others might resist fiercely, trying to hold on to the old ways at all costs. This could lead to disagreements and tensions between people who were once united. The constant pressure to change, to abandon your traditions, to live by rules that make no sense to you, adds another heavy layer to the burden your people are carrying. On top of the sickness and the land loss, you now face the threat of losing your very identity, the customs and beliefs that have shaped your people for thousands of years. Your world isn't just shrinking, it's being actively reshaped into something you barely recognize, something that doesn't fit the land or the people who have always lived here. So you're living with this terrible sickness having taken so many, and the newcomers are taking pieces of the land, bringing their strange rules. In the midst of all this confusion, there are often talks, attempts to make things work, to find a way for everyone to live in the same world, even if it feels like two very different worlds colliding. Imagine sitting across from some of the newcomer leaders. Maybe there's an interpreter there, trying to make your words understandable to them, and their words understandable to you. You talk about the land, about sharing, about living together peacefully. Agreements are made, promises are spoken. Sometimes a paper is brought out, with writing on it. You might be asked to make a mark on it, maybe a symbol that represents your tribe or your name. The newcomers seem to place great importance on these pieces of paper and the words written on them. You, on the other hand, place importance on the words that are spoken, the promises made face to face, the understanding reached between people. Your agreements are often sealed with gifts, with shared meals, with ceremonies that call upon the spirits and the ancestors to witness the promises being made. A promise is a sacred thing, a bond between people. It should be strong like a good rope, not easily broken. And at first, maybe things seem okay. The newcomers stay within the agreed upon areas. Maybe there is some trade, some cautious interaction. You hope that maybe, just maybe, a way can be found to share this land, this world. But then, slowly at first, and then faster, the promises start to unravel, like that good rope starting to fray, then snapping. More ships arrive, bringing more people. These new people don't seem to know about the agreements that were made, or they simply don't care. They push beyond the lines that were agreed upon. They take land that was supposed to be yours to keep. Imagine the newcomers built a settlement on one side of the river, and the agreement said you could still hunt and fish on the other side and use the river itself. But then newcomers start building on your side of the river too. They put nets in the water that block the fish. They clear the forest where you hunt. When you go to them and say, "This is not what we agreed," they might look at you with confusion, or pretend not to understand, or simply tell you the agreement has changed, or that it never meant what you thought it meant. The pieces of paper they put so much value on, the treaties, they often interpret them in ways that always benefit themselves. They might say the paper gives them rights you never intended to give. They might simply ignore the promises made on the paper when it suits them. This makes no sense to you. A promise is a promise. An agreement is an agreement. How can words once spoken and agreed upon simply vanish? This constant breaking of promises creates a deep sense of mistrust. It's hard to know who to believe anymore. It's hard to enter into any new discussions or agreements when you know in your heart that they are likely to be broken as soon as it is convenient for the newcomers. This isn't just frustrating, it's destabilizing. It makes it impossible to plan for the future, to know what land will be safe, what resources will be available to you and your children. Historians generally agree that the history of interactions between European powers and later the US and Canada and Native American tribes is marked by a pattern of treaties being made and subsequently broken, often as the colonial population grew and expanded westward. A mainstream historical fact is that these broken treaties resulted in the loss of vast amounts of native land and resources, and are a primary source of the deep-seated mistrust that developed. It's a point of contention among experts if the European negotiators always intended to break the treaties, or if their concept of treaties simply allowed for them to be renegotiated or invalidated based on changing circumstances and power dynamics, which still amounts to them not upholding their end of the bargain as understood by the native people. A quirky, lesser-known tidbit is how these treaty negotiations were sometimes conducted with great ceremony by the Europeans, involving elaborate documents, official seals, and formal speeches, perhaps to impress or confuse the native leaders. Meanwhile, native leaders might have viewed the essential part of the agreement as the exchange of gifts, the shared pipe ceremony, or the spoken words, seeing the paper as merely a record, not the agreement itself. Imagine the cultural disconnect. One side valuing the physical document above all else, the other valuing the spoken word and the ceremonial bond. It's like you're agreeing to build a house together, and they think they bought the blueprint, while you think you agreed to share the tools and the labour. This pattern of broken trust isn't just about land. It affects everything. If they break promises about land, will they keep promises about trade, about protection, about anything? It creates a constant state of uncertainty and vulnerability. You might try to adapt, to find new ways to live on the smaller pieces of land left to you, but the feeling that any agreement can be erased at any time hangs over you like a dark cloud. Imagine explaining this to your children. You teach them the importance of keeping your word, of honouring your agreements, but the world they are growing up in shows them that promises from the powerful newcomers mean very little. This undermines your own authority as parents and elders, and teaches a harsh lesson about the unfairness of the world they now inhabit. The newcomers might see these broken promises simply as necessary steps for progress, for their settlements to grow. They might not even see it as breaking a promise, but rather as claiming what is rightfully theirs, perhaps because they believe their way of life is superior, or that were given the land by their god. But from your perspective, it feels like betrayal, time and time again. It's like they speak with a forked tongue, saying one thing and doing another. This erosion of trust makes peaceful coexistence incredibly difficult and often leads to conflict. So the land is shrinking, and the promises made about it are often broken. This physical change to the landscape has another huge impact on your life. It makes getting food much, much harder. Remember how your life was tied to the land, knowing where to hunt, where to fish, where to gather plants. The newcomer's arrival and their way of using the land disrupts all of that. They clear vast areas of forest for farming or building. This destroys the habitat for the animals you hunt, the deer, the bear, the smaller game. Where do the animals go when their home is cut down or fenced off? They disappear or move far away, making hunting trips much longer and less successful. Imagine walking for days to reach a hunting ground that used to be nearby, only to find it's now a settler's farm, or that the animals you seek are simply no longer there in the numbers they once were. Your skills as a hunter, skills passed down through generations, become less effective in this changed landscape. The rivers and streams are also affected. The newcomers might build dams to power their mills, blocking the passage of fish like salmon that are vital to your diet. They might pollute the water with waste from their settlements or industries. This makes the fish sick, or drives them away, or makes them unsafe to eat. Fishing, another cornerstone of your food supply, becomes unreliable or even impossible in some areas. Even gathering plants becomes difficult. The fields and forests where you collected berries, roots, nuts, and medicinal plants are being ploughed under for farms or built upon. You might not be able to access those places anymore. The knowledge of where and when to find these plants becomes less useful when the places themselves are gone. The newcomers also hunt, but often in a different way. They might hunt certain animals like beaver for furs to sell back in Europe, with an intensity that quickly reduces the animals' numbers. They don't always follow the practices of conservation that your people use to ensure animal populations remained healthy year after year. Their focus is often on taking as much as they can, as quickly as they can, to make money. This depletes the resources for everyone, including you. Sometimes the settlers bring their own animals, cattle, pigs, horses. These animals might roam onto your remaining lands, eating the plants you need or disturbing the areas where you hunt or gather. It's another disruption to the natural balance. Historians widely agree that European colonization drastically altered the North American environment through activities like deforestation, intensive agriculture, dam building, and overhunting of certain species, which severely impacted Native American subsistence patterns. A mainstream historical fact is that the fur trade, driven by European demand, led to the near extinction of beaver and other fur-bearing animals in many regions, fundamentally changing the ecosystems and the economies of the native peoples who relied on them. It's a point of contention among experts how extensively native peoples managed or altered the environment before European arrival. Some argue for minimal impact, while others point to practices like controlled burning as significant landscape modification. But there's little debate that the scale and nature of European changes were far more rapid and destructive to establish native food systems. A quirky, lesser-known tidbit is how European settlers sometimes introduced new species of plants and animals that weren't native to the area, often unintentionally, like weed seeds in their crops, or intentionally, like livestock. Some of these introduced species thrived and outcompeted native plants and animals that were important to native diets and livelihoods. Imagine suddenly having to deal with aggressive new weeds taking over your gathering areas, or foreign insects harming the plants you rely on, things you have no traditional knowledge of how to manage. It's like your pantry is being raided by things you didn't even know existed, and you don't know how to stop them. Oh dear. Looks like even the dandelions are getting an international update. How utterly inconvenient. This difficulty in finding food creates immense hardship. Hunger becomes a constant threat. Your people might suffer from malnutrition, especially during the harsh winter months when stores run low because the harvest or hunt wasn't successful. This also makes you more vulnerable to sickness. Imagine trying to feed your family when the old ways no longer provide enough. You might be forced to rely on the newcomers for food, perhaps trading valuable furs or labor for supplies. This makes you dependent on them, which further shifts the power balance and makes it harder to resist their demands for land or changes to your way of life. The traditional skills of hunting, fishing, and gathering are not just about getting food. They are tied to your cultural identity, your knowledge of the land, your spiritual practices. When these activities become difficult or impossible, it's not just your stomach that aches, it's your spirit. You feel less connected to the land, less able to fulfill your traditional roles within the community. The changing landscape and the scarcity of traditional foods force your people to adapt, but often at great cost. It's a constant struggle to feed yourselves, a struggle made harder by the fact that the very environment you relied on is being transformed by the newcomers in ways that benefit them while undermining your ability to survive using your traditional knowledge and skills. Your world isn't just shrinking and being ruled by new laws, its ability to provide for you is being actively damaged. So, the land is harder to live on, and the newcomers' rules are everywhere. On top of that, there's a constant pressure, sometimes gentle, often forceful, to stop being you, to give up your language, your customs, your beliefs, and adopt theirs. Imagine being told that the way you speak is wrong, that your language is just noise and that you must learn to speak like the newcomers. Your language is beautiful to you. It holds the wisdom of your ancestors, the names of the plants and animals in your homeland, the specific way your people understand the world. Learning a new language is hard enough, but being forced to abandon your own is deeply hurtful. This pressure is often put on the children. Missionaries or government agents might set up schools, and your children might be taken away to attend them. In these schools, they are often forbidden to speak their own language, sometimes even punished for doing so. They are taught in the newcomer's language, history, and religion. They are often dressed in newcomer clothing, given new names, and taught that their parents' ways are primitive or wrong. Imagine the heartbreak of a parent whose child is taken away to one of these schools. When they return, they might speak a different language, wear different clothes, and no longer understand or value the traditions you tried to teach them. They might be caught between two worlds, not fully belonging to either. This separation of children from their families and culture is incredibly damaging to the bonds within the community and to the passing down of knowledge. Goodness, sending your kids off to school should just be about learning to read and write, not about erasing who they are. Your spiritual practices are also targeted. Missionaries come and tell you your beliefs are false, that your spirits aren't real, and that you must adopt their religion. They might build churches and try to convert you. your traditional ceremonies, your dances, your songs, your vision quests. These are sometimes forbidden or ridiculed. Imagine being told that the ways you connect with the sacred, ways that have sustained your people for thousands of years, are worthless or evil. Even everyday customs are criticized or forbidden. How you wear your hair, what clothes you wear, how you build your home, how you raise your children, how you practice hospitality. All these things that make your culture unique are seen as things to be changed. You are expected to become like the newcomers, to act like them, think like them, believe like them. This pressure to change everything about yourself is relentless. It comes from the schools, from the missionaries, from the government officials, and sometimes even from the settlers you interact with every day. It creates a constant feeling of being judged, of being told you're not good enough as you are. Historians widely document the systematic efforts by European colonizers and later national governments to assimilate Native American populations into mainstream European American culture. A mainstream historical fact is that boarding schools, or residential schools, played a significant role in this process, forcibly removing children from their families and cultures with the explicit goal of suppressing native languages and traditions. It's a point of contention among experts regarding the degree of resistance native people were able to mount against these assimilation policies, and the extent to which cultural practices were maintained in secret or adapted, despite the immense pressure. A quirky, lesser-known tidbit is that while colonizers tried to eradicate native languages, some native individuals became incredibly skilled at using the colonizers' languages, sometimes using their fluency to advocate for their people's rights within the newcomers' own legal and political systems, or even writing down their own histories and traditions in English, French or Spanish, to preserve them in a new format. It's a strange twist, using the tools of the oppressor to preserve what they were trying to destroy. Imagine learning their complicated grammar rules just so you can write a very stern letter telling them to leave your land alone. The pressure to change creates deep internal conflict and division within individuals and communities. Do you try to hold on to the old ways, risking punishment or being unable to get by in the new world? Or do you try to adopt some of the newcomers' ways, hoping it will help you and your children survive, but feeling like you're losing a part of yourself? There are no easy answers, and families and communities can be split by these difficult choices. The constant message that your culture is inferior, that your way of life is wrong, takes a heavy toll on your spirit and sense of self-worth. It's hard to feel proud of who you are when the dominant message from the powerful people around you is that you need to change everything about yourself to be acceptable. This deliberate attack on your culture and identity is a profound form of suffering, adding to the physical hardships and losses your people are enduring. Your world isn't just shrinking and bound by unfair rules. Its very heart and soul are under siege. So the sickness has taken many, the land is being taken and changed, the rules are unfair, and your culture is under pressure. As if that weren't enough, the newcomers are also very interested in taking the valuable things that come from the land, the resources. Remember how your people used the resources of the land sustainably, taking what you needed and respecting the cycles of nature. The newcomers have a different approach. They see the forests, the rivers, and the ground itself as sources of wealth, things they can take and sell for profit in their own distant lands. Imagine watching as the newcomers cut down huge areas of ancient forest, not just for building their homes, but to sell the timber. These are trees that have stood for centuries, part of the living world you're connected to. They are cut down quickly, efficiently, with no thought for the animals that live there. the plants that depend on the forest floor, or the spiritual significance of the trees themselves. Or think about the animals, especially those with valuable furs like beavers. Your people hunted beavers for meat and furs, but you did so in a way that didn't deplete their numbers too much, understanding that you needed them to be there next year and the year after that. The newcomers, driven by the demand for beaver felt hats back in Europe. Yes, hats. People really wanted fancy hats. Hunt them relentlessly, taking males, females, young, old at all times of the year. The numbers of beavers plummet, and in some areas they disappear almost entirely. This not only deprives you of a food source and a resource for furs for your own use, but it also damages the environment, as beaver dams create important wetlands. And then there are the things in the ground, the minerals, gold, silver, copper, other metals. The newcomers are often obsessed with finding these shiny or useful rocks. They will dig up the earth, divert rivers, and leave scarred landscapes behind in their search for wealth. These activities can pollute the water and the land, making them unusable for hunting, fishing, or gathering. Your people might be drawn into this resource extraction economy, perhaps working for the newcomers as guides or labourers, helping them find and extract these resources. This might provide some temporary access to the newcomers' goods, like those metal tools you found useful, but it comes at the cost of participating in the destruction of your own homeland and becoming dependent on the newcomers' economy. It also changes your own relationship with the land's resources, from using them for subsistence and community needs to extracting them for someone else's profit. Historians agree that the economic motivation of acquiring resources played a central role in European colonization. A mainstream historical fact is that the transatlantic fur trade was a major driver of early interactions and conflicts, fundamentally altering native economies and leading to overexploitation of animal populations. It's a point of contention among experts whether native participation in these resource trades was primarily a strategic choice made from a position of agency, or largely a forced adaptation driven by necessity and the disruption of traditional economies and subsistence. A quirky, lesser-known tidbit is that while Europeans were intensely focused on resources like furs and gold, they often overlooked or didn't understand the value of resources native peoples had used for centuries in sophisticated ways, like specific medicinal plants, specialized fibers for weaving, or unique pigments for dyes and paints. So they might be frantically digging for gold while walking right past plants that could cure scurvy, a common and deadly disease among settlers. It's quite something, isn't it? They wanted the shine, you knew the lifesavers. This exploitation of nature's riches is another way your world is being taken apart. The land is not just being occupied, it's being mined, logged, and trapped out, losing its ability to support the life it once did. The natural balance is further disrupted. The resources that sustained your people are being shipped across the ocean, becoming wealth for people you've never met, while your own people face increasing hardship. Imagine the feeling of seeing your beautiful forests turned into stumps, your rivers empty of fish because they've been blocked or poisoned, the land dug up and scarred. It's like seeing the lifeblood of your world being drained away. This relentless focus on taking, on extraction, without respect for the land or its original inhabitants, is a fundamental part of the colonial process. It shows a worldview that is deeply different from your own, one that sees nature not as a relation to be lived with, but as a commodity to be exploited. Your world isn't just shrinking, ruled unfairly and pressured to change. It's being stripped bare of its wealth and vitality. So you're dealing with all these immense changes: sickness, lost land, broken promises, cultural attacks, and resources being stripped away. And when problems arise, when conflicts happen, which they inevitably do in such a stressful situation, you find that the newcomers' system of sorting things out, their system of justice, is anything but fair to you. Remember your traditional ways of resolving disputes, talking things through with elders, seeking balance and restoration, perhaps offering compensation to mend the harm done. These methods were about keeping the community strong and in harmony. The newcomers' system is very different. It's based on written laws that you didn't create and don't understand, laws that often seem designed to protect the property and interests of the newcomers above all else. Imagine a dispute with a settler. Maybe their livestock have trampled your crops, or they've trespassed on land that is still supposed to be yours, or perhaps there's a conflict over resources. You try to resolve it in your traditional way, or you try to explain your side to the newcomer, but they might dismiss your concerns, or they might take the matter to their own authorities, a judge, a magistrate, someone who knows only the newcomer's laws and often has little understanding or respect for your customs or rights. When you appear before their authorities, your language might be a barrier. Even with an interpreter, the nuances of your situation, the history of the land, the context of your culture are often lost or ignored. Your testimony might not be given the same weight as that of a newcomer. Their concept of evidence might be different. They might focus on written documents that you can't read, or on ideas of ownership that you don't share. Imagine being accused of a crime under their law, maybe something that isn't considered a crime in your culture, like hunting on land they now claim to own, even if you've hunted there your whole life. You might be arrested, imprisoned in a way that is completely foreign and terrifying to you, and judged by people who have no understanding of your intentions or your way of life. The punishments they hand down might seem incredibly harsh and unfair compared to your own ways of dealing with wrongdoing. Even when you are the one who has been wronged, getting justice in their system is incredibly difficult. If a newcomer harms you, damages your property, or even kills one of your people, their system might protect them. There might be different standards of proof, or judges who are biased in favour of their own people. You might see newcomers commit acts of violence or injustice against your community and face little or no consequence under their laws, while your own people are harshly punished for minor offences or for defending themselves. This unfairness is deeply demoralising. It shows you that in their world, your life, your property, your rights are not valued the same way theirs are. Their justice system is not blind. It clearly favours the newcomers. It's another tool used to control and dispossess your people. How can you trust a system that is so clearly stacked against you? Historians broadly agree that the legal systems imposed by colonizing powers consistently disadvantage Native Americans, denying them equal rights and often being used as a tool to enforce colonial policies, particularly regarding land seizure and the suppression of traditional governance. A mainstream historical fact is that Native Americans were often excluded from colonial and later state and federal court systems, or their testimony was deemed less credible than that of Europeans, leading to systemic injustice. It's a point of contention among experts whether individual judges or officials ever genuinely tried to be fair within the constraints of the biased system, or if the unfair outcomes were always a direct result of deliberate discriminatory policy and intent from everyone involved. A quirky, lesser-known tidbit involves attempts by some native groups to use the newcomers' legal system to their advantage, studying their laws and treaties and bringing cases to court to defend their rights, even when the system was biased against them. Imagine having to learn their complicated legal language and rules just to try and fight for what was taken from you, using their own weapons against them. It shows incredible resilience, even in the face of such profound unfairness. It's like trying to win a game when they wrote the rulebook and keep changing the rules as you play. The experience of unfair justice reinforces the sense of powerlessness. You're living in your own homeland, but you're not treated as equals in the eyes of the law. Your traditional leaders and systems of governance are undermined, and you are subjected to a foreign system that doesn't recognize your inherent rights or your humanity in the same way it recognizes the newcomers. This constant exposure to unfairness adds to the heavy weight your people are carrying. Your world isn't just shrinking, disrupted, and attacked culturally and economically. When conflicts inevitably arise, the very system meant to resolve them is biased against you. So you're facing all these enormous challenges: sickness, land loss, unfair rules, cultural pressure, resources being taken, and a justice system that doesn't work for you. In the middle of all this, the newcomers brought new things, new objects, and while some seemed useful at first, many brought their own set of troubles, changing your world in unexpected ways. Imagine seeing the newcomers with their tools made of metal, axes, knives, pots. Compared to your tools made of stone, bone, or wood, these metal items seem stronger, sharper, more durable. An axe can cut down a tree faster. A metal pot can sit directly in the fire without breaking. These seem like good things, improvements. You might trade for them, giving furs or other goods. Having these new tools can make some tasks easier. Maybe you can build things differently, or prepare food in new ways. But then there are other new things, like guns. These are strange and powerful weapons. They make a terrifying noise and can kill from a distance with a small metal projectile. Your traditional weapons, your bows and arrows, spears or clubs, require skill, strength, and getting close to your target. Guns change everything. If the newcomers have guns and you don't, it puts you at a terrible disadvantage in conflict, whether you're defending your land or competing for hunting grounds. This can force your people to try and get guns themselves, often by trading more and more valuable resources, which speeds up the resource depletion we talked about. It also changes the nature of warfare, making it deadlier and more impersonal. Imagine trying to defend your home with a bow and arrow against someone shooting at you from far away with a loud, smoky stick that spits out death. It's a very unequal fight. And then there is something else the newcomers bring, something sweet and tempting at first, but incredibly destructive. Alcohol. Your people have no traditional experience with drinks like rum, whiskey, or brandy. Your bodies react to it differently than the newcomers' bodies do. It can quickly lead to addiction. The newcomers, unfortunately, often use alcohol deliberately in trade or negotiations. They might give you alcohol to make you more willing to sign away land or to make unfair trades. Imagine trying to make important decisions for your community when key people are struggling with addiction. The introduction of alcohol has devastating effects on communities. It disrupts social order, leads to violence, neglect of families, and further health problems on top of the diseases already present. It undermines traditional authority and social structures. It's a substance that your people weren't prepared for, with consequences that were catastrophic. It's like giving a child a powerful, dangerous tool they have no idea how to use safely, and then taking advantage of the chaos that follows. Not funny, just terribly sad and often deliberately cruel. Other new items like manufactured textiles, cloth, or blankets, while seemingly harmless, can also bring changes. If you start relying on trading for blankets instead of making your own from animal hides or woven fibres, it can lessen the need for traditional skills and activities. It ties you further into the newcomer's economy and makes you dependent on them for things you used to provide for yourselves. Historians widely agree that the introduction of European goods, particularly firearms and alcohol, had profound and often destructive impacts on Native American societies. A mainstream historical fact is that the fur trade intensified due to the desire for European goods like metal tools and guns, leading to increased competition and conflict between tribes, as well as environmental degradation from overhunting. It's a point of contention among experts whether native peoples were simply passive victims of these new technologies and substances, or if they actively sought to acquire and control them for their own strategic purposes. Using guns for defense or hunting, though the long-term outcomes were undeniably challenging. A quirky, lesser-known tidbit is how quickly some native craftsmen learned to work with the new materials. While traditional skills were sometimes lost due to reliance on trade goods, many native people adapted, becoming skilled blacksmiths who could repair or modify firearms and metal tools, or incorporating new materials like glass beads or metal scraps into their traditional art forms and clothing design. It wasn't just a one-way street of receiving goods. There was also innovation and adaptation happening even under immense pressure. Imagine taking some bits of scrap metal they left behind and turning them into something beautiful and completely unique to your own artistic traditions. The introduction of these new tools and substances didn't just change what you used, it changed how you lived, how you interacted with each other and with the world. Guns changed hunting and warfare. Alcohol created social chaos and vulnerability. Reliance on traded goods changed economies and skills. These weren't just neutral items. They were powerful forces that added to the disruption and hardship caused by the newcomer's presence. Your world wasn't just shrinking, unfairly ruled, culturally pressured, and economically exploited. It was also being altered by the very objects and substances the newcomers brought with them, often with unforeseen and negative consequences. So, the world around you is changing in so many difficult ways. Your land is shrinking, the food is harder to find, your culture is pressured, and new, harmful things like sickness, unfair laws, guns, and alcohol are part of life. And then, in many places, the newcomers decide that even the smaller piece of land you have left is too much. They want it, and they decide you have to leave. Imagine being told you must leave the place where your family has lived for longer than anyone can remember. The place where your ancestors are buried, where the spirits of your people reside, where every mountain, river, and valley has a name and a story in your language. You're told to gather what you can carry and walk, often hundreds or even thousands of miles, to a new place, a place you've never seen before, a place the newcomers have set aside for you. These forced journeys are brutal. You might be marched at gunpoint by soldiers. There isn't enough food or water provided. Sickness spreads rapidly among people weakened by the journey and the conditions. The elderly and the very young suffer the most. People die along the way, and you might not be allowed to stop and bury them properly according to your customs. Imagine the pain of leaving your loved ones' bodies by the side of a trail in a strange land far from home. The new land you are taken to is often undesirable. It might be dry, infertile land that is difficult to farm. It might lack the animals or plants you traditionally rely on for food, medicine, or shelter. It's a foreign place, without the familiar landmarks, without the sacred sites, without the history of your people etched into the landscape. You don't know this land and it doesn't know you. Arriving in this new place doesn't end the hardship. Often, the promises made about providing food, supplies, or protection in the new territory are broken. You are left to try and survive on unfamiliar, often poor, land with inadequate resources. You might be crammed together with people from other tribes, even traditional enemies, leading to further tension and conflict. Historians refer to this process as forced removal or relocation. A mainstream historical fact is that the United States government, in particular, enacted laws like the Indian Removal Act of 1830, which led to the forced relocation of many tribes from their ancestral lands east of the Mississippi River to areas designated as Indian Territory, mostly in what is now Oklahoma. The most infamous example is the Cherokee removal, known as the Trail of Tears, where thousands died during the journey. It's a point of contention among experts whether the government's motivation was purely humanitarian, as they sometimes claimed, to protect tribes from settlers, or primarily driven by the desire for native lands and resources, with most modern historians agreeing the latter was the dominant factor. A quirky, lesser-known tidbit is that despite the immense suffering, some native people on these forced marches attempted to continue their cultural practices as best they could. They might carry sacred objects secretly, share traditional stories and songs during the long nights, or try to perform what ceremonies they could under the watchful eyes of the soldiers. Imagine trying to keep the spirit of your people alive, telling stories by a meagre campfire after walking all day, knowing you might die tomorrow, but needing to pass that story on just in case. It highlights incredible courage in the face of overwhelming despair. Bless them for keeping those stories going, even when their feet hurt and their hearts were breaking. The emotional and psychological toll of forced removal is immense. You're losing your home, your connection to the land of your ancestors, your sense of belonging. You're treated as if you are less than human, simply an obstacle to be moved out of the way. The trauma of the journey itself, witnessing sickness, death, and suffering among your loved ones leaves deep scars. Arriving in a strange, unwelcoming place and facing continued hardship reinforces the feeling of displacement and loss. This is more than just losing property. It's losing your anchor in the world. Your identity is so tied to your homeland, its geography, its history, its spiritual power. To be ripped away from it is to lose a part of yourself. The new land doesn't hold the stories, the memories, the sacred connections. You're like a tree that has been roughly pulled from the soil, where its roots ran deep and shoved into barren ground far away. It's incredibly hard to flourish in such conditions. The forced journeys are one of the most painful chapters in the history of colonization, a clear and brutal example of the newcomers' willingness to inflict immense suffering to achieve their goals of land acquisition and control. Your world wasn't just changed and diminished. In many cases, you were violently expelled from it and forced into an alien landscape, carrying only the weight of your losses and the hope that somehow your people could survive. So, you've endured sickness, lost your land, faced unfair laws and cultural attacks, seen your resources taken, been impacted by new, harmful things, and perhaps even been forced to leave your ancestral homeland on a brutal journey. Throughout all of this, one of the deepest wounds is the attack on and loss of your sacred places. Remember how deeply connected your people are to the land. This connection isn't just about physical survival, it's profoundly spiritual. Certain places on the land hold immense power and significance. They might be burial grounds where your ancestors rest. They might be sites where important ceremonies have been held for centuries, places where you connect with the spirits, where creation stories are rooted, where vision quests are undertaken. These places are holy, vital to the spiritual well-being of your people and the continuation of your traditions. Imagine these sacred places being taken over by the newcomers. Perhaps a burial ground is ploughed under for a farm or built upon. Maybe a mountain peak or a rock formation that is central to your creation stories is seen by the newcomers as just a piece of scenery or a place to dig for minerals. A sacred grove of trees might be cut down for timber. A holy river or lake might be polluted or dammed. This is not just a physical loss, it is a spiritual catastrophe. Losing access to these sites breaks the connection between the living generations and the ancestors, between your people and the spiritual forces that govern your world. It makes it difficult, sometimes impossible, to perform the ceremonies that are essential for maintaining balance, for healing, for marking important life stages, and for passing on religious knowledge. Imagine trying to explain the deep, spiritual significance of a place to someone who sees it only as real estate, or a source of resources, or just an undeveloped piece of nature. They don't understand that the stories are embedded in the rocks, that the spirits reside in the trees, that the power of creation flows through the river. They might look at your reverence for these places with confusion or dismiss it as superstition. Sometimes sacred objects associated with these places or with your religious practices are taken by the newcomers. They might be seen as curiosities or valuable artifacts to be collected and displayed in museums, or simply stolen. These objects aren't just historical items to you. They are living parts of your spiritual practice, imbued with power and meaning. Their loss is like losing a part of your spiritual body. Historians acknowledge the profound spiritual impact of colonization on native peoples, including the desecration and loss of sacred sites. A mainstream historical fact is that many sites considered sacred by Native Americans were taken, developed, or otherwise made inaccessible by settlers, governments, and corporations, often leading to long-standing conflicts and efforts by tribes to reclaim or protect these areas. It's a point of contention among experts regarding the extent to which Christian missionaries understood or deliberately targeted the spiritual core of native beliefs versus simply viewing them as something to be replaced by their own religion, though the outcome was clearly devastating to native spiritual practices. A quirky, lesser-known tidbit is that in some instances, when sacred sites were threatened, native people found incredibly creative and determined ways to try and protect them, sometimes using the newcomer's own legal system, or conducting ceremonies in secret, or adapting rituals to be performed in different locations or in ways that wouldn't be recognized by outsiders. Imagine needing to hide your deepest spiritual connection, practicing your most sacred rites in secret, just to keep them alive. It shows the incredible importance these places held and the lengths people would go to maintain that connection, like trying to pray loudly in your heart when you're forced to whisper with your mouth. The loss of sacred places adds a deep layer of spiritual pain to the already immense suffering. It's not just about losing physical territory, it's about being cut off from the source of your spiritual strength, the wellspring of your identity and connection to the universe. It makes the work of cultural survival and resilience even harder when the places that nourish your spirit are gone or defiled. It reinforces the feeling that the newcomers respect nothing that is sacred to you, that their only gods are progress and profit. Your world wasn't just physically taken and ruled over, its spiritual heart was attacked and wounded. So, you faced wave after wave of devastating change and loss. Sickness, land taken, broken agreements, unfair rules, cultural pressure, resources gone, new troubles from new things, forced journeys, and sacred places lost. All of this hardship, all of this suffering takes a tremendous toll, not just on the physical body, but on the spirit and the mind. Imagine carrying the weight of all these losses, the grief for the loved ones lost to sickness, the anger and frustration of seeing your homeland taken piece by piece, and being unable to stop it, the confusion and resentment of being forced to live by unfair rules and being told your own ways are wrong, the hunger that comes from being unable to hunt and gather as you used to, the deep sadness of seeing your culture undermined, your language silenced, your children taken away, the trauma of forced marches and displacement, the spiritual ache of losing connection to your sacred places. This constant stress, this accumulation of trauma, weighs heavily on individuals and on the entire community. It can lead to what we might now call depression, anxiety, a feeling of hopelessness. It can strain relationships within families and tribes as people struggle to cope in different ways. Some might turn to the destructive new things the newcomers brought, like alcohol, seeking a way to escape the pain, only to find it creates more problems. Imagine the feeling of powerlessness. You're trying to protect your family, your community, your way of life, but the forces arrayed against you seem overwhelming. The newcomers have more people, more powerful weapons, a different system that seems designed to benefit them and disadvantage you. Your traditional leaders might struggle to find a path forward in a world that no longer respects their authority or wisdom. This isn't just about individual sadness. It's about a collective burden carried by the entire people. The trauma is passed down through generations, affecting not just those who lived through the initial events, but their children and grandchildren as well. The stories of suffering become part of the collective memory, a constant reminder of what was lost and how it was lost. Historians and other scholars increasingly recognize the profound and long-lasting psychological and social impacts of colonization on Native American communities, often referred to as historical trauma. A mainstream historical fact is that the cumulative effects of violence, dispossession, cultural suppression, and systemic discrimination have resulted in disproportionate rates of mental health challenges, addiction, and related social issues in many Native communities today. It's a point of contention among experts how best to define, measure, and address this historical trauma, and what the most effective paths are for healing and recovery at both the individual and community levels. A quirky, lesser-known tidbit is that despite the immense suffering, Native people often found ways to maintain their sense of humour, even dark or gallows humour, as a coping mechanism. Laughter can be a powerful form of resilience, a way to release tension and affirm humanity even in the most inhumane conditions. Imagine finding something to chuckle about even when everything feels terrible, perhaps a wry observation about the newcomer's strange habits, or the absurdity of a colonial rule. It's like the spirit refusing to be completely crushed, finding tiny cracks for light and laughter to seep through. It's dark, yes, but it's also deeply human and strong. The burden on the spirit is perhaps the hardest to describe, the hardest to see from the outside. It's the feeling of being constantly under threat, of living in a world that is actively trying to erase you, of seeing everything you hold dear being systematically dismantled. It's the quiet despair, the moments of profound sadness, the difficulty finding hope when the future looks so bleak. This is the unseen cost of colonization, the damage done to the hearts and minds of the people who lived through it and their descendants. It's a deep, aching wound that doesn't always heal easily. It's the weight of history pressing down, making every day a struggle not just for physical survival, but for the survival of the spirit itself. Your world wasn't just physically and culturally destroyed. The suffering inflicted left a heavy burden on the spirit of your people. So, we've journeyed through some incredibly difficult times, seeing the immense suffering, loss and change that came with the arrival of the newcomers. It was a period of profound disruption, pain and injustice. But as we reach the end of our story tonight, it is crucial to remember that despite all of this, despite the sickness, the land loss, the broken promises, the cultural attacks, the forced removals, and the burden on the spirit, the story of Native American people did not end. It continued, and it continued because of incredible strength, resilience, and the deep, deep will to survive and to keep the spirit of the people alive. Imagine being one of the survivors. Your community might be much smaller, your homeland might be gone, or a tiny piece of what it once was. The old ways might be harder to practice openly, but you hold on to what you can. You remember the stories your elders told you, even the ones who are now gone. You remember the language, maybe teaching it quietly to your children. You remember the ceremonies, perhaps practicing them in secret places, or adapting them to the new, difficult circumstances. You find ways to resist, sometimes through open conflict when there is no other choice, but often through quieter, everyday acts, refusing to give up your language entirely, continuing to gather medicinal plants, even on land that is now owned by others, sharing the old stories with the next generation, finding ways to laugh, to connect, to support each other even in the darkest times. You learn to navigate the newcomer's world when you have to. You might learn their language to communicate, understand their laws to protect yourself as much as possible, or use their tools and technologies in ways that help your people survive. This isn't necessarily giving up your identity. It's adapting, finding ways to live in a world that has been forced upon you, while still holding on to who you are inside. It's a complex, ongoing act of balancing survival with cultural preservation. Your people's connection to the land, even when much of it is lost, remains strong. The memories of the homeland, the sacredness of the earth, these things cannot be entirely erased. Even in new territories, you might find ways to connect with the natural world, to find new sacred places, to adapt your understanding of the relationship with the earth. The resilience comes from many sources: the strength of family and community bonds, the deep connection to a rich history and culture, the spiritual beliefs that have sustained your people for millennia, and the sheer determination not to disappear, not to be defeated. It's a strength that is born out of incredible hardship, a refusal to let go of who you are. Historians emphasize that Native American history is not just a story of victimhood, but also a story of incredible resilience, resistance, and adaptation. A mainstream historical fact is that despite immense population decline and dispossession during the colonial era and beyond, Native American people and cultures survived, adapted, and continue to exist today, maintaining unique identities, languages, and traditions. It's a point of contention among experts to what degree modern native cultures represent a continuity of pre-colonial traditions versus being new cultures forged in the crucible of colonization and its aftermath. But there's no doubt that distinct native identities persist and evolve. A quirky, lesser-known tidbit that illustrates this resilience is how native artists, even when traditional materials were scarce or forbidden, found ways to incorporate new materials and influences into their art while maintaining traditional styles, symbols, and meanings. Imagine taking the glass beads brought by the newcomers and using them to create intricate patterns on clothing or bags that tell ancient stories, blending the new with the old in a beautiful act of cultural survival and innovation. Or taking a European violin or guitar and adapting your traditional songs to be played on it. That's not just coping, that's continuing, creating, keeping the spirit vibrant in new ways. The story we've explored tonight is a painful one, full of loss and suffering. It's a part of history that shows the devastating impact of one group of people imposing their will and their way of life on another, without respect or understanding. But it is also a story that shows the incredible strength of the human spirit, the power of culture, and the deep, unbreakable connection between a people and their homeland. The challenges didn't end with the early colonial period, but the foundation of resilience built during those hard times has helped native peoples continue on a long road, facing new challenges but always remembering who they are and where they come from. As you drift off to sleep now, imagine the quiet strength that flows through generations, the knowing smiles of elders passing on stories, the steady hands weaving traditional patterns even with new materials, the quiet determination to speak the language, to remember the sacred ways. It's a strength that endures, like the mountains and rivers themselves. Let the difficult images of hardship fade now. Just the feeling of that quiet strength remaining, a deep root that cannot be easily pulled up, like an old tree that has weathered many storms, still standing, still reaching for the sky, finding nourishment in the earth, finding light in the sun, letting go of the day, letting go of the story, feeling grounded, feeling peaceful, drifting towards sleep.